The wounded arrival the world was spinning when John opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was not made of metal like the ship he remembered, but smooth stone carved with strange symbols. A soft glow came from crystal lamps fixed into the walls, bathing the room in a gentle golden light. The air smelled different, like warm herbs mixed with the faint scent of fur. He tried to move, but a sharp pain in his side made him gasp. Voices came from somewhere nearby, speaking in a language he didn't understand. The words were quick, sharp, almost like purring mixed with growls. Then a shadow moved into his view. She was small, barely reaching his chest if he stood up, clearly not human. Her head was crowned with two large fox-like ears, twitching slightly as if listening to his heartbeat. Her long tail swayed behind her. Covered in thick, soft fur, her amber eyes studied him with sharp intelligence. She wore a white medical robe trimmed with fur, and a small pouch hung from her belt. "You." "Awake," she said, in accented basic. Her voice calm but firm. "Don't move." John's first instinct was to ask where he was, but before he could speak, she climbed up onto the bed without hesitation. Light as a cat, she stepped over his legs and moved closer, her small hands pressing against his chest. Her touch was warm, and her claws, small but sharp, barely pricked his skin as she worked. "What are you?" John started, but stopped when she shot him a look that silenced him instantly. "Relax," she said, her tail flicking once. "I fix you." Before he could argue, she reached into her pouch and pulled out a small jar. Inside was a glowing blue salve that seemed to hum faintly. She dipped her fingers into it and began spreading it over his wound. The moment it touched him, a strange warmth spread through his body, not just healing warmth, but something deeper. It felt as if her touch reached past his skin and into his bones. Her movements were quick, almost too quick for his eyes to follow. She pressed certain points along his ribs, his shoulder, and even his neck, muttering in her language. At times, her face came so close to his that he could see the tiny patterns of fur along her cheeks. Every time she moved, the scent of wild forests and something sweet filled his senses. John noticed other figures in the doorway, tall aliens with furred arms and bright eyes, watching silently as the little nurse worked. Some of them smirked. Others whispered to each other. It made him uneasy, as if they knew something he didn't. "Why are they looking at me like that?" he asked quietly. The nurse didn't answer. Instead, she gave a small, almost playful smile before leaning over him to adjust the bandage around his side. She tied it tightly, her claws brushing against his skin in a way that made him shiver. "We'll walk soon," she said, "but not now." She climbed down from the bed as easily as she had climbed up. But before leaving, she pressed a small object into his palm, a smooth stone. "Warm to the touch. Keep," she said simply. "Helps you heal." Then she turned and padded away, her tail swaying rhythmically. Disappearing through a side door, John lay there, staring at the stone in his hand. Something about it made his heartbeat slow and steady. He could still smell her scent on the air, still feel the ghost of her touch on his skin. He didn't know who she was or why she treated him like this. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary medical care. And whatever had just happened between them, it was only the beginning. Strange methods. John woke to the sound of soft footsteps circling his bed. At first, he thought it was a dream. But then the scent of herbs and fur drifted into his nose, and he knew the little nurse had returned. She was carrying a shallow wooden tray filled with strange objects, small heated stones, bundles of green leaves, and a bowl of thick golden liquid that shimmered under the light. Without asking permission, she set the tray beside him and climbed onto the bed again. Her movements were as silent as before, graceful and light. "You still hurt," she said in her accented basic, tilting her head as if reading his pain from his face before he could answer. She pressed one of the warm stones against his ribs. The sudden heat made him gasp, but she didn't move it away. Instead, she placed 2 more along his side, each one resting on a point that made his muscles loosen and his breathing deepen. "What is this?" John asked. "Fixing," she replied simply. She dipped her claws into the golden liquid and began tracing lines along his chest and shoulder. The substance felt cool at first, then grew warmer, almost like it was alive. John shivered not from cold, but from the strange sensation of energy pulsing beneath his skin. The nurse's amber eyes stayed locked on her work, her ears twitching occasionally as if listening for something deep inside him. She moved with purpose, climbing onto his legs to reach higher. Her small weight barely pressed the bed, but every touch of her claws sent an odd spark through his nerves. She hummed softly, a tune that sounded more like a lullaby than anything medical. John found his own breathing slowing to match the rhythm of her hum. It was as if his body was obeying her without his consent. From the doorway, 2 alien medics appeared. Whispering in their strange language, John caught a word repeated several times. It sounded like bonding. He didn't know what it meant, but the way they smirked made him uneasy. "What are they saying?" he asked, glancing toward them. The nurse didn't look up. "They talk too much," she said, her tail flicking once before she returned to her work. She began pressing certain points on his arms and neck with her thumbs. Each time she did, a wave of heat and tingling spread through him, as though his blood was rushing faster. Then she leaned close, her face inches from his, and whispered something in her own language. The words were gentle, but carried a weight he could feel in his bones. John swallowed, unsure if she was casting a spell, giving instructions to his body, or something else entirely. When she finally stepped back, his chest was covered in delicate golden patterns from the liquid. They weren't random smears. They looked like symbols, curling lines, and shapes that seemed to shift slightly when he blinked. He tried to sit up, but her small hand pressed firmly against his chest. "No," she said. "Let it stay." He lay back down, the warmth from the symbols seeping deeper, making his eyelids heavy. For a moment, he thought he might drift to sleep, but then he felt something strange. His heartbeat was not alone. A second rhythm pulsed faintly in his mind, quick and light, perfectly matched to her movements as she tidied the tray when she picked up a leaf bundle. He swore he could smell its scent before it even touched his nose. "What are you doing to me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. The nurse looked at him with a small, knowing smile. "Making you strong," she said. "Making you ready." She finished by placing a final heated stone in his palm the moment it touched his skin. A wave of warmth rushed through him, and his vision blurred for a second. When it cleared, she was standing by the door, watching him with those sharp amber eyes. "Rest," she ordered. "Next time, you move." And then she was gone, leaving John with the unsettling feeling that whatever she was doing wasn't just healing. It was changing him in ways he couldn't yet understand. The rumor in the war John's strength was slowly returning, but the strange feelings in his body were not going away. Every morning he woke up with more energy than before. As if his muscles had been quietly training while he slept, his senses were sharper too. He could hear the soft scrape of claws from the hallway, smell the herbs before they were even brought into his room. And always, somewhere deep in his chest, he could feel that second heartbeat, quick and light, like it belonged to someone else. It was on the 3rd day that he overheard the whispers. 2 alien soldiers were sitting near the far corner of the ward, speaking in low voices. John couldn't understand every word but one term kept repeating: bond link. He leaned slightly, pretending to adjust his blanket from their tone. He could tell this bond link wasn't just normal medicine. One of the soldiers glanced toward him, smirked, and said something that made the other chuckle. Their eyes carried the same strange, knowing look he had seen in the nurse's amber gaze. Later that day, an older patient, covered in scars, was moved to the bed beside him. The man was alien too, with scaled skin and dark reptilian eyes. After a while, the stranger leaned over and spoke in slow, broken, basic. "You have nurse with ears," he said, tapping his own head where ears might be. John frowned. "Yes. She's the one treating me." The man chuckled. A dry, rasping sound. "You will not leave her," he said simply. "Not ever." John didn't like the way he said it, as if it was a fact, not a warning. That evening, the little nurse returned. Carrying another tray of strange tools and herbs, John decided to ask directly, "What's a bond link?" She froze for a second, her ears tilting back. Then she gave a small smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "It is connection," she said, placing the tray down. "You get stronger, I keep you safe. That's it." John asked, watching her carefully. Her tail flicked once. "That's it." For now, she began her work again, placing heated stones along his spine this time. Each press sent a warm pulse through him, almost like it was sinking his body to hers. The sensation of her touch was no longer just physical. He could feel her focus, her calm, even her faint amusement when he flinched at one point. She leaned close to whisper instructions in her language. He didn't understand the words, but somehow his breathing adjusted to match the rhythm of her speech. When she was done, she didn't leave right away. Instead, she sat at the edge of his bed, studying him in silence. Finally, she spoke softly. "Your body is almost ready. Soon you will move with me." John frowned. "Move with you? For what?" She gave no answer, only stood and walked out, her tail brushing against his blanket as she passed. The next morning, the reptilian man beside him was gone. In his place was a younger alien woman with bright green skin. She glanced at John, then leaned closer. "You are the human with the Beastwoman nurse." He nodded slowly. "She chose you," the woman said, her eyes wide. "Do you know what that means?" John shook his head. "It means," she whispered, "she has decided you are her partner, in battle and in life." Before he could reply, the woman turned away, clearly unwilling to say more. The words echoed in John's mind all day. Partner, life. It sounded absurd. Yet, when the nurse returned that night, he found himself looking at her differently. She worked in silence, but every time her amber eyes met his, he felt that strange second heartbeat quicken. And the unsettling truth began to creep into his mind. Whatever she had done to him, it was no accident. It was deliberate, and it was only getting stronger. The first test the night was quiet. Almost too quiet. John lay awake, staring at the dim glow from the crystal lamps. The second heartbeat in his chest was steady, calm. But then, without warning, it quickened. His eyes snapped open fully. A moment later, the sharp wail of an alarm filled the ward. Shouts echoed through the halls, boots pounding against the floor. The air itself seemed to tighten, filled with tension and the scent of burning metal. Before John could sit up, the little nurse appeared in the doorway. Her amber eyes were sharp, her ears twitching rapidly. She was dressed differently now, no? Soft medical robe, but tight dark armor that clung to her small frame. A short spear was strapped to her back, and her tail swished with alert focus. "Up," she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You can walk now." John hesitated. "What's happening?" "Enemy," she said simply, stepping forward to grab his arm. Her touch was firm, and the moment she pulled, his legs obeyed, moving faster than they should have been able to. The hallway was chaos. Alien medics rushed patients out, while armed guards ran in the opposite direction. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. John felt his senses stretched wide. He could hear the hum of weapons charging, smell the faint scent of blood. It wasn't just adrenaline, it was the bond. He was feeling what she felt, and it was guiding his every step. They turned a corner just as a group of enemy soldiers burst through a side door. The nurse reacted instantly. leaping forward with feline speed. She sprang onto John's shoulders without warning, her small weight perfectly balanced. From her new perch, she gripped his hair lightly with one hand while pointing with the other. "Left, now," she ordered. He obeyed without thinking, raising a weapon taken from a fallen guard. Somehow, every shot he fired landed true, as if her eyes were his. They moved like a single creature. When she ducked, he lowered his head. When she twisted, his body followed. The enemy soldiers fell back, startled by the unnatural precision of their movements. John's heart pounded not from fear, but from the rush of moving in perfect sync with someone else. They reached a blast door at the end of the corridor. The nurse jumped down, her claws tapping against the control panel in quick, practiced motions. "Hold," she said. John took position in front of her without thinking. Raising his weapon, 2 more enemies appeared, and he dropped them before they could fire. Her tail brushed his leg as she worked, the contact sending a strange calm through him despite the danger. The door opened with a hiss, revealing a narrow service tunnel. "Inside," she ordered. They slipped in just as the hallway behind them erupted in gunfire. The tunnel was dark, lit only by small strips of dim light along the floor. John's breathing was heavy, but the second heartbeat was steady, guiding him forward. The nurse moved ahead, every step silent despite the metal floor. At one point, she stopped and pressed her ear to the wall. "They go around," she murmured. We cut through. They emerged into a storage bay filled with crates. From here, John could hear the battle raging outside. The nurse turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You did well," she said. "You move like one of us." John stared at her, still catching his breath. "What was that?" he asked. "How did we fight like that?" She tilted her head, her smile small but knowing the bond. She said simply, "Now you understand." Before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the bay. The nurse's ears twitched, and she crouched low. "We fight again," she whispered, and in that moment, John knew this wasn't just a test of his body, was a test of the connection between them. And the real fight had only just begun. The bond deepens. The battle outside faded into distant echoes by the time John and the little nurse returned to the safety of the medical bay. The halls were quieter now, but not calm. Every alien they passed gave them strange looks, some nodding with respect, others whispering behind their hands. John could feel it again, that second heartbeat, steady and strong, matching his own. It was no longer a strange sensation. It felt normal to normal. The nurse led him to a smaller chamber away from the main ward. It was dimly lit, filled with the smell of burning incense. She motioned for him to sit on a low bench carved from smooth stone. "You fought well," she said, her tail curling around her legs. "But now you must learn." "Learn what?" John asked, watching as she took a small blade from her pouch. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed the tip of the blade to her own wrist and drew a shallow line. Golden blood welled up, shimmering faintly in the light. Before John could react, she took his hand and made a small cut across his palm. The sting was sharp. Without hesitation, she pressed her bleeding wrist to his hand. The golden blood mixed with his red, sinking into his skin like it was alive. A faint warmth spread through him, stronger than before. What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low. "Sealing," she replied. Her eyes locked on his. Now the bond is complete. John stared at their joined hands. The warmth became a pulse, matching both their heartbeats. He could feel her emotions in a way he couldn't explain. Calm, focus, and a deep sense of belonging. It was overwhelming. She pulled away and showed him her wrist. Where the cut had been, a faint golden mark now glowed, curling in an intricate pattern. He looked at his own palm. A similar mark was there, though dimmer. "It will grow brighter," she said, "as we grow stronger." John didn't know what to say, Why me?" he finally asked. She tilted her head, her ears twitching slightly. "Because you survived," she said simply. "Because you fought with me as if you were one of us." He thought about the fight in the corridor, the way their movements had matched perfectly, the way he had felt her guiding him without words. It hadn't just been luck, it had been something deeper. In the days that followed, John noticed more changes. His reflexes were faster, his vision sharper. Sometimes he could sense her coming before she even entered the room, and when she was near, his thoughts felt clearer, his strength greater. The other medics and soldiers kept their distance, watching them with a mix of curiosity and caution. One evening, while they were alone, John finally asked the question that had been eating at him. This bond, can it be broken? The nurse's expression grew serious. "Only if one dies," she said. "It is not meant to be broken." The weight of her words settled heavily in his mind. It meant they were tied together no matter where he went, no matter what he did. He wasn't sure if that was comforting or terrifying. That night, he had another strange dream. He was running through a dense alien forest, the moonlight spilling through the trees. The nurse ran ahead of him, her movements graceful and fast. He could smell the earth beneath their feet, feel the wind in his hair, hear the rustle of leaves as creatures moved in the shadows. When he woke, his heart was pounding, and his legs ached as if he had truly been running. She was sitting beside his bed, watching him silently. "You felt it, didn't you?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "That was my home," she said softly. "And now it is yours too." John didn't know what the future held, but he was beginning to understand one thing: whatever this bond was, it was no accident. It was destiny. And he was already too deep to turn back. The choice and battle. The mountains were cold that morning, the air sharp and thin. John stood on a ridge beside the little nurse, both of them scanning the valley below. The bond between them pulsed with quiet strength, a constant rhythm beneath his own heartbeat. They had been sent here with a small team to escort supplies through a dangerous pass. But the silence was wrong. Too still, too empty. The nurse's ears twitched. Her tail went rigid. "They're here," she whispered. Before John could ask who, the first shot rang out from the cliffs. The air cracked with energy, fire, and one of their soldiers dropped instantly. "Down," she ordered, shoving him behind a cluster of rocks. The bond flared in his chest, filling him with a sharp edge of focus. The enemy poured from the rocks above, dark-armored figures moving with deadly precision. John raised his weapon, but the nurse was already moving. She darted across the ridge like a flash of fur and steel, her spear striking with perfect aim. Every movement she made pulled at him through the bond, guiding his shots, his steps. It was as if she was painting a battle in his mind, and he was filling in the strokes. But then pain, not his own, it struck through his chest like a hot knife, making his vision blur. He looked up just in time to see her stumble, a dark stain spreading across her side. The enemy had hit her. Rage boiled in his blood, fierce and uncontrollable. The bond roared inside him, drowning out everything else. He moved without thinking, charging toward her with a strength he didn't know he had. Bullets and energy bolts whizzed past, but none seemed to touch him. When he reached her, she was on one knee, still trying to fight. Her breathing was sharp and uneven. "You can't stop," she hissed, trying to push him away. "Not leaving you," he growled. The enemy closed in, but John fought like a storm. Every strike fueled by the pounding of their joined heartbeats. He could feel her pain feeding his fury. Every enemy that fell seemed to push him to fight harder. Finally, the last of them broke and fled. The ridge was littered with smoke and fallen bodies. John dropped to his knees beside her. Blood stained his hands as he pressed them to her wound. "Stay with me," he said, his voice breaking through the bond. He could feel her slipping, the rhythm weakening. "No," he said sharply. "You're not leaving me?" Her amber eyes locked on his. In them, he saw no fear, only trust. "You are mine now," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "And I am yours." The bond pulsed once, twice, then steadied. John felt warmth spread from his hands into her body, like the energy was flowing from him into her. Her breathing evened out, and some of the pain faded. He didn't know if it was his own will, the bond's magic, or something else entirely. But it worked. By the time the rest of their team caught up, she was stable enough to walk with his. Help! They made their way down the ridge together, his arm around her shoulders, her tail brushing his leg with each step. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The bond had spoken louder than words could that night as they camped under the alien stars. John sat beside her. She rested against him, eyes closed but ears twitching faintly. "You saved me," she murmured. He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "We saved each other." The bond between them pulsed warmly in agreement. John knew then that whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together, and nothing, not war, not distance, not even death would break what they had now. The unbreakable link the war ended weeks later. But the bond between John and the little nurse did not fade. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing day. He no longer had to guess what she was feeling. He could sense it instantly when she was happy. A light warmth filled his chest when she was worried. A faint pressure tightened his ribs. It was as if their souls were walking side by side. Even when their bodies were apart, life in the alien cities slowly returned to normal. Shops reopened, streets filled with voices, and soldiers who had once been enemies now avoided open conflict. John should have been thinking about going home. Earth was still out there, waiting for him, but whenever he pictured leaving, the bond pulled at him like an invisible chain, not heavy, not painful, just a constant reminder that part of him belonged here now. One evening, he sat with her on the roof of the medical bay. The city below glowed with hundreds of lanterns, and the wind carried the scent of roasted food and blooming night flowers. She sat beside him, tail curled neatly around her legs, ears tilted toward the distant sounds of music. "You think about leaving," she said quietly, not as a question, but as a statement. John didn't deny it. "It's my home," he said, "but this place." "You," his voice trailed off, because the truth was too complicated to put into words. She looked at him for a long time, her amber eyes steady. "Then take me with you," she said simply. John blinked. "You'd leave your world." Her ears twitched once. "My world is where you are," she replied. The bond does not care about planets. The weight of her words settled deep inside him. He realized then that the bond wasn't a trap. It was a choice one they had, both already made without saying it aloud. The next days were filled with preparation. Some of her people came to see her off, offering gifts and blessings. Others watched in silence, unsure how to feel about one of their own leaving with a human. John could feel their doubt through the stairs, but the bond between him and her burned warm and unshaken. On their last night in the city, they walked together through the streets. She stopped suddenly at a small market stall and bought 2 silver pendants shaped like intertwined lines. One she placed around his neck, the other she wore herself. "It will remind us," she said, "even if far." John didn't tell her he didn't need a reminder. The mark on his palm was enough. But he wore it proudly anyway when the day came to leave. The spaceport was busy with ships taking off and landing. John carried his small pack, while she walked beside him, tail swaying in a slow, steady rhythm at the boarding gate. A guard stopped them. He looked at her, then at John. "You are bound," the guard said, his tone neutral. "Yes," John answered without hesitation. The guard stepped aside, letting them through. It was such a simple exchange, yet it felt like a declaration to the entire galaxy inside the transport. ship, they found seats by the window as the engines roared to life. She rested her head against his shoulder. Through the bond, he felt her calm, her trust, and the quiet excitement that hummed beneath it all. The ship lifted into the sky, leaving the alien city behind, but neither of them looked back. There was no need. John knew that wherever they went, whether to Earth or some distant star, the bond would remain. It was more than a connection of mind and body. It was a promise, unspoken, unbreakable. And as the stars stretched before them, he understood something he hadn't before. Home wasn't a place anymore. Home was the heartbeat that matched his own, sitting right beside him.